All right, greetings, everyone. We are live again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Uhuru. Thank you so much for joining us. As we always do, before we get started, we just want to thank you all, the Dynasty Mirror Search for Uhuru Army, for the support over the years. We are growing, and I greatly appreciate it. Those who have supported through tours, those who have came with me on tours, Cash App, donated, Patreon, everybody. Those who've just been here since the beginning, I greatly appreciate it. It really means a lot. Speaking of tours, Nigeria, we are rolling August 16th to the 22nd. Nigeria, come and join us for the Oshun Festival. We're gonna have a great time. And me and Ebube, we're still linking up in Abuja.
Sure.
Shortly afterwards. So I'm gonna stay in Lagos for probably, so the tour will be over on the 22nd. I'm gonna stay in Lagos probably for like another 3 days, and then I'm gonna head to Abuja. So
then from there we're heading to the east.
Then we headed to the east. From there, we headed to the east. So I am looking forward to that. Cannot wait. Also, guys, make sure you visit oneafricaproperties.com, oneafricaproperties.com, your central source for real estate on the continent. I'm going to be announcing some exciting developments, because I think what we're offering is pretty unique. Me and my business partner, Aurelia, we are also licensed real estate agents here in America. We are also we are vested in the continent as well. So for those on the continent, if you're looking for investment properties in America, reach out to me and Aurelia. Again, we're licensed real estate agents. And then for those who are looking to acquire property in Africa, go to oneafricaproperties.com and also visit dynastymirror.com. Oh, your boy, Two Nigers in the chat. Two Niger, you and Ebube be nice to each other. You guys play fair, okay?
Two Niger, that's my guy. He's a solid guy. He's a great guy.
In fact, just for Two Niger, here you go, Two Niger. Bam, we go. There you go. We have the.
Now you guys are matching.
Yeah, Benin bronze for you. There you go, Two Niger. There you go. So with Two Niger, when you come on, we got you. We got you. Hold on, I can't. This thing can't fit in here. I don't know. Okay, whatever. Let me just set this down over here. So Two Niger, we got you, Two Niger. We got you, Two Niger. So when Two Niger comes on, the mask is ready. The Benin's bronze is ready for him right here.
Big shout out to Two Niger.
All right. So without further ado, we have our brother Ebube Okoli on with us today. We're going to be discussing, this is kind of like part 2 from our previous conversation, and we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of Nigeria restructuring. So Ebube, go ahead and introduce yourself. Also, shout out your page so people can go and subscribe. Please go and subscribe to our brother Ebube's page, Up Close and Center. Great page. So, guys, make sure you go subscribe to that on YouTube. But Ebube, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Greetings for those who don't know me. My name is Ebube Okoli. For those who do know me, it's good to see you. I'm a Nigerian born by way of Owerri, but I'm from Anambra State. However, I was born in Imo State. I'm a Nigerian born, American trained attorney and geopolitical analyst. I'm also the host of Up Close and Center. That's a channel here on YouTube. If you haven't been to Up Close and Center, make sure you go ahead and head over and subscribe. The logo looks like this. You'll know when you're there because the lettering is white. The background is black. And it's good to see everybody again. As Dynasty alluded to, this is essentially a part 2. What we were discussing is a very multi-layered. I see people are already putting in questions. We'll definitely get to those quickly. And let me just
let's go and start with the question. French isn't really. I don't know. Is France involved in heavily in Nigeria?
Well, let's take a look. Nigeria should have a strong anti-French stance in all geopolitics moving forward in all aspects. Don't even allow French people to own their own parking spot in Nigeria. West Africa is Nigeria's. That's an interesting perspective. In regards to what we were talking about earlier, we're talking about an issue called restructuring. And right now that's the hot debating point in Nigeria is restructuring. What restructuring essentially means is that every nation operates like a company. In every company, you have an operating agreement or a charter or something that dictates the system, how this company is going to operate and run. So in every nation, you have an article like that, whether it's a constitution or articles of confederacy or whatever document enshrines the system that's going to be over top of the people that dwell within the jurisdiction of that system called a nation. So essentially, you want to think about nations like corporations. You'll understand that metaphor. So now when people are talking about changing the document by which companies or countries rather operate, that's called restructuring. It's essentially changing the structure or the structure or the dynamic of the system that the nation follows. And a system is just people acting in concert towards a certain goal. So typically nations are formed historically, nations are formed by people coming together because they realize it's in their best interest to be together rather than to be apart. And so what they do is they create a document that enshrines the system that they all agreed upon towards the greater goal of making the nation whatever the people who came together to put it together had envisioned. So most countries have a constitution.
Right.
So that's typically the instrument by which restructuring happens. You essentially change the constitution. Now, you have to remember that when it comes to sovereignty, sovereignty is an equation that's twofold. You have economic independence and you have political independence. So typically that document or that constitution is going to enshrine the political system as well as the economic system, how things are going to be governed in regards to that. So when you talk about restructuring, you talk about changing the constitution in regards to the economics and the politics of that particular area. And so with Nigeria, for example, this has been coming up rather lately, political as well as potential economic restructuring. And I'll talk about political before I talk about economic restructuring. Those in favor of political economic restructuring essentially want, their main gripe is that in Nigeria, there's something called the exclusive list. So with the federal government keeps certain activities, certain areas of the economy purely within its control. So if you don't know, Nigeria is divided in, of course you know, but for those who don't know, Nigeria is divided into essentially 36 states plus the federal capital territory, essentially making 37.
Right.
And so these states essentially act like mini federal governments in that they have a governor, and then they essentially have a legislative. The judiciary is slightly weaker than the federal judiciary, but the federal is essentially supreme to all the states. And the states essentially are under the federal government. The federal government is supreme in that particular setup. So within the people who discuss political restructuring, what they're looking for is for the federal government to devolve certain powers to the states. So they're looking for security. They're looking for certain things with their economy, what they can actually invest into, certain control over the ports, maybe the airports, different things in their region that they want to put into the pure control of the state without the federal government regulating it. Because certain states believe that they can do a better job than the federal government is currently doing. So the people who are pushing for political restructuring are more so discussing things that are on the exclusive list between the federal government being transferred directly to the states so the states have more control over them. So that's the political restructuring. Typically, that's not the area where there is a lot of pushback, because at the end of the day, the federal government has privatized certain things, and that political restructuring isn't necessarily the one that stokes a lot of feelings, if you will.
Right.
Now, the one that creates the issue is the economic restructuring, because at that point you're dealing with money, right? And you have to remember that 34 out of the 36, if you will, let's say 37 states, get more from the center than they do actually from their internally generated revenue, which means that the majority of the states are almost wholly dependent on the federal government allocation to pay salaries, do infrastructure projects, and many of the things that they actually do in their states. Right. So many are against that because they say, listen, the problem isn't economic restructuring, the problem is corruption and what you do with the money, because the states receive a lot of money. The states receive a great deal of money, and if properly employed, you'll see rapid development if all of the money was used judiciously with zero corruption. But of course, we don't live in a perfect world, so there's never going to be zero corruption in any system that involves human beings, because by nature, humans, if left to it and allowed to, may corrupt the system. Right. So if that system is corrupted and funds are diverted, the question now is, okay, if you're already diverting funds, what are you going to do with more funds? Why should we entrust any particular area with more funds if the people are already embezzling and misappropriating funds that are coming to them currently. So it sounds like there's a slight echo. Is that on my side or is it on your side?
You sound good to me.
Great. Okay. Yeah. We'll go ahead and keep going then. So now that typically the economic restructuring typically falls under the category of something called resource control. So resource control is the more controversial one. That's the one that gets pushed back because you're talking about changing a system that currently favors the vast majority of the country by sharing resources. However, some have alleged that such an arrangement makes the states lazy because they don't have to compete when they know every single month the bourgeois is going to be essentially writing them a check to maintain their states. So now some say that model has hampered the economy because there's less incentive to develop your state if you know as a guarantee that you're going to receive this amount of money every single month, regardless of what you internally generate or how much you tax or any actual real economy you have within the state. So there's two ways to understand restructuring. There's the political as well as the economic. Now, of course, you have a lot of opinions on this. Some are of the opinion that restructuring doesn't need to happen at all, and what needs to happen is that the current units merely need to use the resources that have been allocated to them in a better manner than what they're currently using them for. So now you have a situation where some people are saying we don't need to restructure. What we need is for people to get serious about developing their states, because if you go to every state in Nigeria, you're going to see certain people are living very good and certain people aren't living very good. And typically the people who are living very good are the people who are close to the seat of power within every state. So now they're essentially saying that you guys within those states need to figure out a way to make sure that the economic prosperity goes around more than you're doing, because if things are restructured, all that's going to mean is that people who have built 10 mansions and only live in one may now build 100. That's the allegation. So people who are against restructuring typically use that argument, and to an extent that does hold weight. The last time we discussed this issue, someone did call up and state that the problem is a culture of corruption, and if that's not addressed, then no system put on top of such a bad culture, if you will. And culture is just what you do every day. If you practice corruption every day, then your culture is corrupt.
It's corruption.
It's corrupt, and so essentially some have alleged that the culture, regardless of the system, is what needs to be fixed and addressed, and there needs to be a system put in place to address the system of corruption that has kind of become the default system. And I talked about that in a documentary I made called Corruption in Africa. If you haven't been up close and center, go ahead and subscribe. Also, if you're watching here, let's go ahead and get this channel to 100,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Guys, hit that like button again. Please hit the like button. And what we'll do in about 17 minutes, we'll open up the lines. I will place the link in the chat room, and you're more than welcome to call in and add to the discussion. Now, when we were discussing today, a restructured Nigeria will look something similar to the United Kingdom, where you have Scotland, England, I guess Wales, Ireland, I believe, or is that true?
Well, it all depends. It all depends on what they put. So, for example, here's what former President Goodluck Jonathan did. He put together a national conference, essentially, where every ethnic group, religion, culture was represented. I did a fairly good job of gathering all the stakeholders within the country. And you have to remember there are over 250 individual ethnic nations. Some allege even more than that, depending on how you group people together. So you have all these people. Then you have three religions. You have traditionalists. You have those who practice African spirituality. You have Muslims and you have Christians. And so, and even within the Christians, you have Catholics, you have Anglican, you have different types. Within the Muslims, you have Sunni, you have Shia. So what Goodluck Jonathan did is essentially put together a very diverse group of influential people who essentially came through and they discussed every single issue and made a reference to the legislative body to say, here are our recommendations. So essentially what the actual system would look like if, for example, restructuring was pushed forth, we'd have to ask, is it just political restructuring or is it economic restructuring? That's really the big question, because people who are before we get to restructuring, we first ask the question, Is restructuring what's needed? Of course, you have people who say yes, and you have people who say no. Now, if your particular answer is no, then the analysis stops there. The only thing remaining is, why do you believe restructuring isn't necessary? Now, for those who believe that restructuring is necessary, there's a deeper analysis, because you now have to ask, okay, do you believe in political restructuring? Do you believe in economic restructuring? And or do you believe in political as well as economical restructuring? And how do you see that going? That's really going to be the real analysis, and where the heavy thought process is going to go into. Because once you get past those questions, and let's say the yeses have it more so than the nos, and the nation decides on restructuring or pushes in that direction, now you have to essentially bring everybody together and say, what is this thing going to look like? So you're going to have to bring all the stakeholders, similar to what Good Luck Jonathan did, and they're going to have to, similar to when it's essentially like merging a corporation. You know, the CEO get together and they hash it out, and what the corporation looks like at the end of the day is all based on negotiation. So from this particular position, looking into it, we wouldn't actually know exactly what the system will look like, if at all restructuring even takes place. Now, what we would see potentially could be something like the United Kingdom, or return to something that we've seen in the past with Nigeria. So, for example, Nigeria has had several constitutions. The current constitution that we're under was promulgated and put out in 1999. That's the constitution that we've been running with today. However, Nigeria has had several other constitutions prior to the constitution that we were under. So if we take a glimpse back to some of those constitutions, and some of those constitutions have been very big points of reference, because people who push for restructuring oftentimes cite back and say we should have the original system that was in Nigeria prior to military intervention and the government being changed from regions into states by Yakubu Gowon. So some are now saying we should return back to regions as opposed to states. Some are saying that the problem isn't the states. Some are saying we need less states. Some are saying we need more states. So we wouldn't actually know what exactly the system is going to look like, but there's a strong sense that people are pushing for regionalism. And there's also a strong undercurrent for political independence. For political restructuring, as well as economic restructuring. When people often say the blanket term of restructuring, most people don't specifically specify, but you have to listen to them to understand what perspective they actually fall under. So we don't know exactly what it would look like, but we know for a fact that it would be different from the current system that's here, if at all restructuring takes place.
So, Ebube, say Nigeria restructures, you have this restructuring. How would that, I guess, curb corruption? So is it corruption? Is it the issue, or does Nigeria really need restructuring? Like, if we got rid of the corruption, would the restructuring even be needed?
And once again, the definition of corruption is, and this is my particular definition, it's different from Webster's definition. My particular definition of corruption is deals with a system structure, and a system structure is people who act in concert to achieve a certain goal. Through thought, speech, and action, they're continuously working towards that goal, even when separated or together. So now we look at corruption. Corruption is a system structure. All it is people. All right. Now, if you take a step back, corruption is just people. Now, if we take a step back, we see that anytime there's something that needs to be done, there's a system for doing that thing that needs to be done. So when that thing that needs to be done, a system is employed. So anytime that system is bastardized or changed in a way that harms your perceived enemies, or in a way that favors you and or your perceived allies, at that point you're engaging in corruption. And corruption isn't limited to developing nations. Of course, corruption is worldwide. There are certain practices in more developed nations that could be alleged to be corruption. But taking a step back from that, once we see that corruption is a system structure, we see that in order to combat corruption, what you need to create is a counter system. Now, right. The system has shown up, and that system is a system of corruption underneath a system of democracy or communism or feudalism or anything of that nature. Once the system of corruption has taken root, you now have to create a counter system to counteract the system that has taken place that's causing the corruption. So regardless of whether or not you're operating under a federal structure, a communist structure, or regional structure, if a system of corruption has occurred in a wide scale within that political or governing structure, then it's like a cancer. It's going to hollow out the government. It's going to eat it up from the inside. So yes, corruption needs to be handled because corruption essentially kills any system that you put over top of it. It's like if there's rot in the wood and you just paint over top of it, you still have the rot there. It doesn't matter what color the paint is. So those are two things that need to be handled. Some have alleged that with restructuring, being that the states or regions or whatever they want to call them would have more power, then that means that, and they'd be localized, which means that if you're going to steal, you're stealing directly from your particular ethnic group. So they want to, people who are advocating political restructuring, potentially some have alleged that it would be best to have ethnic states, meaning that this ethnic group has its state and this ethnic group essentially has its state, and they're essentially autonomous within the country. So how they run their particular ethnic group is how they run their ethnic group. And the assumption is that you're less likely to steal from your people than to steal from everybody collectively. And so that has been put forth. But once again, the point that you raised is paramount. If a system of corruption has come into play, then what good is it to restructure if you don't deal with the system of corruption? So the system of corruption would have to be dealt with simultaneously while you implement a new system over top of the existing system, if indeed that position is taken.
Okay. Guys, hit that like button again. Please hit that like button. And what we'll do, we'll go ahead and open up the lines. If you'd like to call in, ask a question, make a statement, by all means, link is in the chat room. Link is in the chat room. Ebube, what are your thoughts on, because in, I guess in Anambra yesterday, all the businesses, I guess, shut down, I guess, in protest. What are your thoughts on, I guess was IPOB behind it or Biafra? Because there's two separate groups. There's IPOB and there's just the Biafran group. Like, what are your thoughts in regards to
there's a few, just in regards to the groups. So we'll address that and then we'll get into the other issue. But in regards to the group, there's a few groups. And you have to remember that Biafra at one point was a country. And Biafra is more so a mentality. It's an idea. So anybody that picks up that idea is officially a Biafran. So this group can come up tomorrow and say, well, I've picked up that idea, therefore I'm a Biafran. So there's a lot of different groups that all essentially have the same vision. Some of them go about it differently. You have Mossad, you have the indigenous peoples of Biafra. You have a few other groups that are pushing for that. So that's the difference. And you do have a lot of groups, but I think the largest two are the Mossad and the indigenous peoples. Those are the two largest groups currently, I believe. Now, in regards to it wasn't really Anambra State in particular. It was across the former Eastern region and parts of the former Midwestern region. You have to remember Biafra was essentially it was what they call the Southeast today, and the South minus parts of Delta and Edo State. So essentially, what had happened is that, of course, there were many civilian casualties during the war, into the millions. And so those people were given a day of remembrance. And in remembrance, people decided to simply stay at their homes and say, this is how we're going to commemorate the lives of the people who were lost.
Okay. So, guys, I put the link in the chat room. Again, if you want to call in, click on that link and go ahead and come in and add, whatever you would like to add to the conversation. Let's be constructive.
And again, let's also, when we're talking about it, let's frame it within restructuring, because this is really, it's a dense issues, and we can get off into the weeds in so many different directions and be here for 6 hours. So for those who do call in, you can discuss whether you're in favor of restructuring, whether you're not in favor of restructuring. If you're not in favor of restructuring, why? If you are in favor of restructuring, are you more in favor of political restructuring? If so, what type? And if are you more in favor of economical restructuring, and if so, what type? Or are you in favor for both?
Okay, so those are the ground rules. Respect the ground rules. Again, if you'd like to call in, click on the link and come in and add to the conversation. Off topic. In fact, someone was asking the other day. I didn't have an answer. The refinery, the Dangote, is that on track to be an open?
Yes, it's moving. Actually, it's actually more on track. It's actually moving at a faster pace than expected. Okay. There were some delays initially, yeah, but that's moving at a pretty fast rate, which is a good thing because that's really going to take care of the fuel, essentially having someone else refine your fuel just to sell it back to you. That's a very archaic practice. That needs to really stop.
Yeah, so that would be a plus. I know that area, Beduleki, and going down towards the refinery and the free trade zone.
Yeah, the Lekki free trade zone. That's going to be a whole nother city. You're going to have Echo Atlantic, the whole Lekki Peninsula. That if you want to get real estate now, there's a time 10 years ago. Those places were dirt cheap. Now, if you want to talk about the Lekki, almost any part of Lekki, you're going to pay some good money, even if you're very far away from Victoria Island, past phase 1 and most of the roundabouts. Those areas are now, there's no more empty space there. Those areas are almost all developed. And it's going to accelerate once the refinery and the free trade zone open up. That area is really going to take off. So if you're looking for real estate in that particular area, it might be a good place to look.
And with that being said, we have some properties in that area on oneafricaproperties.com. So if you're interested, go to oneafricaproperties.com. Fatima, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. I want to thank you both and for bringing this topic to our audience. Good job, brother Ebube. That was an excellent presentation, I'll call it. I'm not in favor of restructuring, and I'm from Nigeria as well. I classify myself as Yoruba lady. I'm from South. The reason I did not agree with the restructuring is that if you look at the Constitution in 1953, before the original Constitution, before the independence, even the white man give us something beautiful, which is restructure, which is a regional system of government. Every region can grow according to their resources before the military coup. So that the only reason I did not agree with restructuring is that if we can go back to the original constitution, it will be fantastic and everybody will go on their way. But I know it's not going to happen easily because of greedy-minded. They're already making in Nigeria system right now, which is that 1%. So, but I hope that something can be done. So that's just my contribution. Thank you.
To just clarify something, if, for example, we were to go back to either of the previous constitutions, that in and of itself would be a form of restructuring. Restructuring is essentially can be done by changing the Constitution. Changing it to something wholly new or changing it to something that's been seen in the past would be a form of restructuring. So if you're in favor of going back of changing the Constitution to another Constitution, essentially you're in favor of restructuring.
Oh, well, maybe I don't understand restructuring, because when you say restructuring, everybody times it differently.
And that's why I was very explicit. That's why I was very explicit and gave the definition. So, for example, just to briefly explain, anytime you have people that come together, a forum, for example, a nation, there's a document that dictates how the nation is going to be governed, how its sovereignty is going to be executed. Now, there's two layers to that. There's political and there's economic. Typically, both of those system structures are going to be laid out in a document called the Constitution, for example. So when you have that Constitution, that's going to create a structure under which you function as a nation. So anytime you change that document that changes the structure of how you function as a nation, you've essentially restructured that nation. So if you're in favor of changing the document, which will, of course, change the structure of the nation, then by default, you're in favor of restructuring. You just believe that the best outcome of restructuring would be to go back to an earlier constitution, and you're not alone in that belief. There are tons of scholars and analysts who believe the same thing as you. But let me ask you this. What benefit do you believe that constitution would have over the current constitution?
Well, now, it's a unitary system, which was bringing back in 1999 by military guy, Abacha. So I believe going back to regional system of government is something similar to UK, where they have Wales, they have Ireland and stuff. Now, not only the power go to not the state anymore, the power go back to regional. And if you remember back in the days, especially Yoruba land was doing fantastic. We never rely on federal government. We even pay, because what we have now is that they're trying to say, oh, we have federalism just like US, but that's not happening. So if everybody go back to their region to be able to use their resources, grow according to their whatever they have, the federal government is still going to be there to be getting 10% from regional people. So that means there's still going to be prime minister to represent each region. I think that idea that, even I won't lie to you, the white man is brutal, but they really have brain. So if we can go back to that and everybody grow according to their region, then I won't say there won't be fight. Even the brothers and sisters are fighting, but everybody can do whatever they need to do. Is that going to happen, Yusile? I will say no. Because that marriage, the forced marriage, they already forced on us, even though the marriage is over, amalgamation, 1914 to 2014. It's 100 years already. That's why we're seeing a lot of agitation right now. Maybe it's going to break. I don't know. Maybe it's not going to break. I don't know. But we do know that Nigeria is now working. That would be my contribution, brother. But you give a very fantastic you gave a very fantastic lecture, even for people that come from the region and those people that don't come from region, because we want to educate from each other. And there's a lot of different opinion. But on my opinion, I would prefer to go back to regional system of government. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. All right, anything else you want to add to that, Ebube?
Yeah. And the thing is that the young lady that came on, she initially had come out and said, I'm not in favor of restructuring, but I'm in favor of changing the Constitution. And that highlights an important issue, is that most people truly don't understand what restructuring actually is. And everybody has their own definition, but most people don't stop and think to have an actual definition and say, well, restructuring is X, Y, and Z. And so when you actually look at the definition, you realize that, you know what, maybe you are in favor of restructuring, and you just didn't know it. Because for some reason, the term restructuring has become a very politically charged term. Some people associate it with other things in their head that don't necessarily correlate to what most people who are in favor of restructuring would call it.
Mm-hmm. Guys, if you want to call in, link is in the chat room. Please click on the link. Again, please click on the link. I see a lot of chatter, discussions, debates going on in the chat room. Go ahead and click on the link, which is in the chat room, and join the conversation, and you can add whatever you would like to add. Let's see here. Somebody says restructuring is too late. What are your thoughts on that?
And yeah, you made a good point. That a lot of people in the chat have a lot of different ideas. This is something where everybody's going to have an opinion, and it's an amazing thing. I personally think that it's good that Nigerians are this politically active to this point where they're this politically engaged. So some people do believe that it's too late. I would like to know why they believe that, why they believe it's personally too late to restructure. That would be an interesting point of view to fully have fleshed out. I personally think restructuring can happen at any time as long as the nation it still exists as a nation. A nation can always be restructured. There's no law against that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Somebody says we want the dissolution of the 1914 amalgamation.
Okay. So for those who might not understand what that is referring to, is that Nigeria was essentially several independent nation states before the British came, and the British essentially colonized the area that became Nigeria. And originally, it was broken up into protectorates. You had the North and you had the South. They did that to match essentially the northern portion of Nigeria was the Sokoto Caliphate, and in the South you had the different kingdoms that eventually became the dominant groups of the South. And so the Lugard decided to put the South with the North for the viability of the country. And so he amalgamated them, and the North and the South. And some people have alleged that that was the start of many problems, because you put people together who didn't necessarily share a similar culture or a similar outlook on nationhood. And so they essentially, some have alleged that the North and the South have acted almost as different nations within one nation. And they have alleged that the cultural differences are too stark for the North and the South to have been put together in the way that they were put together. So some people do allege that that was a mistake. So that's what the gentleman who was referencing the amalgamation and saying that it was a mistake, is that the merging of, and you have to remember that nations all over the world are put together based on a common culture, meaning that we, as this many people, this many millions of people, say, you know what, we're French, we believe in this, we believe in that. Across the border, they're Germans, they believe in this, they believe in that. Now, there's something called your core beliefs, right? Now, every culture has core beliefs, which means if you stop everybody from that culture and ask them the same question, you're essentially going to get the same answer, right? So now if you ask a Jewish person, how do you feel about the right of Israel to exist? They're going to say, of course, right? If you stop a Palestinian person, they might say something different. But most Palestinian people will have one thing to say. Most Israeli people will have one thing to say. That's because within every culture, you have certain things that are core to that culture that they all agree on, if nothing else. If nothing else, they're going to agree on maybe these 10 or these 20 things. And that agreement, that cultural understanding is essentially what nations are built around. Because even if we disagree about a million other things, there's these 20 things that are essential to our nation, and we all agree on them. And so that culture, you can have different languages, but still have the same culture. So that culture is essentially what nations were built upon. However, in Africa, the borders were drawn up in such a way by Europeans, and they ignored cultural similarities as well as cultural differences in putting together the African map. So now you have these different cultures within a nation. So African nations are unique in the fact that they, as nations, have to work a little bit harder, because most African nations don't have one dominant culture, except maybe nations like Somalia and different things like that. However, one dominant culture that everybody adheres to doesn't necessarily mean a nation is going to be successful. In Somalia, for example, that nation was at one point was one of the most powerful nations in Africa. Right now, they're having a lot of struggles. They're getting back on their feet, but they're nowhere near where they were at the height of their power as one of the most powerful states in the region. And they have the same culture. So having the same culture doesn't guarantee success. However, most nations are built around having the same culture. However, in Africa, that's not the case. Therefore, we as Africans have to work a little bit harder in order to have working systems that accommodate all the different cultures that we have within the nations that we currently find ourselves in. Rokoya, how you doing?
Hello, hi guys. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Hi, Ebube. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. You always bring such a level head and lots of information. I'm glad I caught a live today where I could express some of my impressions. So, obviously, I'm West African. I am from Ghana and Togo and have some ancestry in Nigeria, but I lived in Nigeria as a teenager in the 80s. And one of the things that I remember is that even at the time that I was there was a lot of agitation in Nigeria politically for the state to be expanded. I think that at the time there were like 12 states, and then they went, I think right now we're about 30 something, if I'm correct. And my question has always been that in Nigeria, for example, even though there's this perspective of a cultural unity among the various major ethnic groups. For example, I mean, I lived in Ibadan, so I knew that there was a quote unquote a Yoruba uh, dominant area. But then, because we lived long enough for me to travel all over to other parts of Nigeria, I know that even though the Ibadans were a certain segment of the Yorubas, there was the Ekitis felt that they had some differences with them, the Ijebus. In fact, I remember there was a major clash at the time of the Modakekes, and there was a whole lot of stuff going at the time. And because of my own ancestry, also my people came from the Yoruba part. My on my father's side, they lived in Togo, but they maintained a lot of cultural identity with what they call Anago. They didn't identify as Yoruba. So when Nigerians, right now, what I hear a lot from a lot of people is, and it's not reverberating among all, but the loud noise we're hearing now is this: let's break into states, let's break into the Yoruba Odua nation, let's have the Biafra, let's have the North. And my question to you is, especially based on your current analysis, talking about how the most of the African countries, to start with anyway, have borders that are not germane to unique language groups. In fact, there's Yoruba in Benin, there's Yoruba in Togo, who have ancestry there. So when we talk about Nigeria breaking, for example, into this Odua nation, it's going to, I think, create a lot of destabilization in a lot of the other countries in the region, especially in Benin and Togo, where we know that France has a major listening post into the whole of West Africa. That's the staging area for a lot of their incursions into other countries, and listening to Ghana and Nigeria, trying to destabilize and all that. I'm asking from your perspective, do you think that a breakdown into separate nations, as some people are suggesting, do you think that's going to bode well for the region, considering where we're moving into a more Pan-African approach and um, a more united perspective in terms of trading with other major regions of the world? Do you really see restructuring as something that Nigeria is going to be able to accomplish successfully, knowing all the various factions and also the regional implications for other countries in the region? What do you think from your geopolitical analysis and all that?
All right. So you asked several questions. I'm going to try and unpack everything. But essentially, you asked about the feasibility of restructuring, and then you also brought up an interesting point, which piggybacked off the point that I brought up, that the borders in Africa put certain nations together and tore certain nations apart. So, for example, the Sokoto Caliphate, to an extent, is in Niger Republic and Nigeria, two very different countries, one similar people. The Yoruba of Nigeria and, of course, Togo, Benin, at the height of one of the greatest Yoruba empires, it stretched out that far. And so those people essentially are culturally Yoruba, but they're in another nation, right? So now if we're talking about ethnic states, and that wouldn't be restructuring, that would be a total dismemberment of the nation. So restructuring has more so to deal with the document that the nations have agreed to create the political and economic system, changing that document to anything else. It could be a reversion to something old, as the previous caller had discussed, or it could be something wholly new that nobody's ever seen before, or it could be modeled after something that has been seen before, like the UK system, for example. So with restructuring just means we're going to rewrite the rules on this particular relationship, how these various nations within this state relate to each other, right? So Some have suggested regionalism, some have suggested other things, and of course that would be something that would have to be worked out at some sort of conference where everybody comes together and actually puts forth how they believe things should go. And of course there's going to be compromises here and there, and essentially everybody would have to work out a system that they all agree to. That's the only way restructuring could work. Everyone has to agree to the system. Everybody has to leave feeling like they've got something. Now that's only if restructuring even takes root. There are many who believe restructuring has no place in Nigeria, and there are some who feel the exact opposite. So after that potential hurdle is crossed, the type of restructuring is what's going to be discussed. And like I said, there's potentially 3 routes it can go. The first route is a reversion to something that has already been seen in Nigeria before, a modification of a previous constitution, or something that's wholly new, or essentially a copy of a system that's currently working that exists somewhere else in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first issue. The second question that you asked before moving to the before going to the next question was in regards to the
So you're
effect on
doing
Africa.
good. You're really laying it down. I really appreciate it. Thanks. So,
Oh, no problem at all. No problem at all.
yeah.
Now, in regards to your other question, the effect it's going to have on the region, I'm going to stretch this out and talk about the effect it can have on Africa if you're talking about a dismemberment. Nigeria is not unique in its ethnic composition. You look at a nation like Ethiopia, and if you look at what Ethiopia is going through right now with certain regions declaring themselves separate from the nation or not under the authority of certain segments of the nation, well, then you realize that they have the same situation that Nigeria has. You look at nations in Kenya, where certain parts of Kenya are essentially saying that they're really part of Somalia and that they're ethnic Somalians and need to be a part of a greater Somalia.
You can
You
add
look
Ghana
at
to that one too. There's a
almost
movement
every
in Transvolta, Ghana, yeah, right now, where they're trying to say they belong to Togo. So I think it's happening
yeah,
in many parts.
and
Yeah.
and so they may have their historical reasons, but you see the issue
Yeah.
that Nigeria, for example, has with many nations being inside of one state isn't unique to Nigeria, and
Yeah.
to an extent, as Nigeria goes, so does Africa. So now it's not just the region of West Africa. This is going to reverberate through all of Africa because Nigeria has an opportunity to set a template to either say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a multi-ethnic state work, which is not really seen. Even in the Western world, you have Czechoslovakia, you have Yugoslavia, you have the Soviet Union, you have all sorts of nations saying, well, thanks, but no thanks, we're going to be an ethnic state. We're Greek, we're not Ottomans, we're not Turks, we want to be Greece. Much respect to them. They have that ability, and that's their right. So now in Africa, essentially, what happens in Nigeria is going to have a huge effect across the continent, because if Nigeria comes up with a workable system, all of Africa is going to come up with a workable system. Because on the larger scale, Africa is actually more united than it's actually ever been. But you have people talking about breaking nations. So it's an interesting paradox that we find ourselves in. So with the African Free Trade Agreement, for example, Africa has really opened itself up to being one market. But at the same time, you have nations within nations saying that they want to actually break from their nation while staying within the free trade agreement. So it's a very interesting situation, and the only true hope is that the right decisions are made, and they're made to benefit everybody. But that's just a hope. We don't know for sure. We can only just hope that.
Thank you so much. I like the perspective, and I'll leave it at that.
Hey,
Really
we
appreciate
appreciate you
it.
joining us.
Thank you for the question.
All right, let's see here. Get two Niger on here, and go ahead and get comments on here. Hold on 1 second. Two Niger, go ahead.
All right, nice one, Chief Ebube, and I'm glad you're able to come in here and talk about Nigeria, and I do respect some of your opinions. However, that ethnic, that cultural argument, I think is a little bit of a false argument. I don't know. Do you know how many separatist movements are in Europe today that want to break countries?
Well, yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot. Because is it because of they don't have the same culture? See, the point is there's going to be people that want to be separate all the time. There's always reason to want to separate. The point is it the right
Yeah,
time
but
for us?
we're more so talking about restructuring, not actually separating the nations. So we're talking about the pros and cons of restructuring. So I'll just lay it out for you. And so, do you believe in restructuring? Are you in the camp of people who believe in restructuring and people who don't believe in restructuring?
I'm firmly in support of restructuring. The reason why I raised that point was because you made this cultural argument. You notice in the
No
in the comments
problem.
I said you made that
No
cultural
problem at all.
argument again.
No problem at
So
all. We'll just move past that point. But are you in favor of political and or economic restructuring, or just economic or just political restructuring?
I'm in favor of any sensible restructuring. And like, for example, like policing, I don't think there's any reason for the central this government to be worrying too much about policing, because some areas will want more manpower, others will want less. So those sort of adjustments can happen organically, but when you are doing it from the central body, they may not feel the level of security needs of different parts of the country. In terms of, there are other areas too, like in terms of revenue, maybe they can liberalize that a little bit. So, but there are areas I actually think they should rein it in more, like in terms of religious tolerance and tribalism and all those things. They should control it more, because if you liberalize that, you have a system whereby everybody is going to be pulling at each other. Every decision you make is going to be second guessed based on tribalism, and that is the problem
Let me ask you
with
a
our nation.
question in regards to, you brought up an interesting point in regards to decentralization, political decentralization of the police force, for example, to have maybe state police, regional police, similar to what was in Nigeria in the past. You had state police, you had local government police, and you had regional police. So it was similar to what we have in America. It wasn't just federal police. Now, the question is this. Here's the pushback against that. And this is what critics against having state police say. They say that, of course, there will be an improvement in security because the people are more closer to the actual people that they're protecting. They don't look at themselves as foreign to that area. So if you're, for example, from Edo State, the Edo State Police would be there. Your particular local government, people, the police from your local government will be the police in your local government. So
Yes.
they understand the lay of the land, and they're not foreigners. And at the end of the day, in every local area, you know who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. Just being from an area, which is good. Now, here's the pushback. Some allege this, and this is what has historically been the argument against state police, is that governors, currently under the current system, governors are the chief security officer of the state in name only, meaning that the head of the police doesn't report to the governor in that state. He reports to somebody else somewhere else. And so even the unit commanders report to other people. So the governor only essentially controls the police officers in his entourage. So maybe the 10 police officers that are actually attached to him are the only police officers that he really has direct control. He has direct control over. So now the fear is this, and this is just the pushback. And I want to ask you this question, because you're in support of that position. Some say that during elections, these governors will now use these state police as private armies to ensure that their political party stays in power. What systems will be put in place to prevent something like that from happening with the state police, in your opinion?
Yeah, that is why you have, in the case of the US, you have the FBI, you have a supra police and this institution that monitors the operations of the police. If they feel that the police is being manipulated or misused, then that they can step in and stop it from happening. I'm not saying the federal government shouldn't have any hand in the policing, but they should oversee it like the Americans do. And I don't know if it's working for the Americans that even went to a civil war. I think there's a chance it will work for us too.
That's interesting. So essentially, in order to keep the state police from becoming private armies of governors, you're essentially saying that there should be an overarching body that essentially prevents corruption of the state police. So
Yes.
a federal police force to police the police at the state level.
Yes.
That's interesting. What other aspects are you a proponent for? You said reasonable restructuring. Now, does that also move over into the economic side of it? Are you in favor of reasonable, as you put it, and I'd like you to define the term reasonable, but are you in favor of reasonable, as you put it, restructuring for economic policies as well? And if so, which ones?
Let's say you wanted to revenues. That's a big one that people tend to talk about in Nigeria. If they want to start controlling their revenue, you can have a situation whereby you negotiate it, and it has to come from some kind of this agreement between all the areas. Because when one side says, this, because we have all this wealth, we want to keep it for ourselves, the other side doesn't have any say, then that's the recipe for serious argument and then this in disputes. But you have to come to an arrangement that says, okay, everybody, this is reasonable within the family of the Nigerian state, where this let's say other regions have votes or the states have their own vote. You have to, I don't know how to do it, but there has to be a way of determining what is the consensus within the country that says this is what you should get, this is what you should get. You can restructure it. Like, for me, that is not even the biggest part. The biggest part is just allowing Nigerians to have peace of mind, security. If you ask me, I'll say strengthen the central the military, so that they can be able to defend the country. Because right now the country is not being defended. The 300,000 soldiers for 200.
When you say not being defended, could you explain? When you say not being defended, in what aspect would you like to see more defense, if you will?
The manpower, extremely low for any country. If you look at the numbers in Algeria, they have 800,000 soldiers for 43 million people. Nigeria has 300,000 for 200 million. And we wonder why we have problems in our country.
Well, and you have to realize too that Nigeria is surrounded by relatively friendly allies, if you will. You have the Niger Republic, you have Cameroon, Chad, of course, has had skirmishes with Nigeria in the past, Cameroon likewise. But essentially, Nigeria is in a very friendly region, if you will. There's no real regional threat.
You can argue that with the UK. The UK is surrounded by water.
Hey, tonight, let me just finish. It's not a place. So, for example, a region where you have unfriendly allies would be China and India, right? Where if you look at the border between China and India, they have thousands of troops stationed at any given moment. They can go ahead and create a war, right? So there's a standoff. You look at regions like Western Asia, you have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, and you have Israel, and none of those guys are really truly friendly to each other in that capacity. So you have certain regions. So, for example, Ukraine, if you look at the Ukraine and you look at the aggressions, you look at Turkey and you look at Russia, they're in areas where they have large standing armies, because we can hear about a war in any one of these places tomorrow and nobody would be shocked. We'd be shocked if Togo went to war with Nigeria. We'd be shocked if Niger went to war with Nigeria. We'd be shocked if Cameroon and Nigeria engaged in a serious war, like a serious war. That's just not Nigeria's plight. Nigeria is in a more friendly, less hostile neighborhood. And that's why I'm explaining what you brought up is a good point. Nigeria is undermanned because Nigeria doesn't have that many direct external threats. The military in Nigeria is typically used for internal threats. But you do bring up a good point. There needs to be more men. And to augment that, some have stated, as you stated earlier, that state forces would be good to augment the federal forces, because the federal forces, their numbers are just insufficient to govern such a large country and keep it safe, because the numbers are astronomical in regards to one soldier per how many civilians. There's a lot more civilians than there are soldiers.
I agree with you, but the consequences of what you said, that we don't have any enemies next door to each other. The problem is that the friendly neighbors don't have enough soldiers. The friendly neighbor to the left don't have enough soldiers. None of them do. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, they spend about 0.5% on defense, when the whole world is spending 2% on defense. The number of their soldiers is so low compared to the rest of the world. The UK is surrounded by water.
As well, you know, the UK spends more on their military than the entire Africa. You know that, right?
It's crazy. It's crazy.
You bring up a very good point. That's ridiculous, in my opinion.
It should be, because when I look at Africa today, I feel I'm sad to say sometimes we feel like a motel where anybody can come in and do whatever they like. No nation in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, has reasonable defense. It's terrible. How can you have low numbers of military when you have young men on the streets, graduates selling top-up cards, driving cabs, people that you can recruit into the military? You don't even need foreign people to help you with that. You can tell your people to donate to it, and they will donate it. They will contribute to the military. You will employ people in the military, pay them good money to earn a good living the right way. At the same time, because you now have security, the diaspora will start coming in, investment will start pouring in. It will pay for itself. And yet,
Exactly.
it's not only Nigeria. Almost all sub-Saharan African countries are the same. And please, if you can find information why that is, because I fear that there is a contract somewhere that they said, they went and signed and said, you are not allowed to have strong military. Because it is scary. When you look at it, the whole world is spending 2% or more on defense, while sub-Saharan Africa is spending 0.5% on average.
Yeah, and another thing is that part of that reason is because when there's a big conflict in Africa that could really get to a war, typically there's foreign intervention. Most African nations still listen to the people that colonized them. So now if the United States says, hey, you guys need to stop, or France says, hey, you guys need to stop, or Britain says, hey, you guys need to stop, 9 times out of 10, those nations are going to stop. So to an extent, you have to understand that sovereignty is political and economical. Many of the nations are largely still have that imprint from the colonial administration still over their nations. So that could be a reason. But that you raise a very interesting point as to why we underfund our armed forces. Part of that could be corruption, who knows? But we also underfund and we underman our military institutions when you compare us in regards to population and budget to other nations in this world. All right, so outside of security, on the economic end, that's the more problematic end, because of course that's dealing with resource control. What system, if at all, would you propose to address economic restructuring?
I would say give 30% to federal government, 70% goes to the states.
So essentially the 80+% that goes to federal government, that would be more than that would be cutting that number by more than half, almost into a third of what the federal government is currently getting, which means that states that rely almost 90% on what they get from the federal government are essentially going to take a huge pay cut. Instantly, the senators from those states, the House of Rep members from those states, the governors from those states, the power brokers from those states, the people who benefit from the current status quo, they're going to have a problem with it. How do you propose getting around those who have power and have an issue against that statement?
Man, I have to be straight with you on this one, because this one I'm not even sure I'm qualified, because it's so complex. Because if you look at it from the south, we have so much resources coming from the south that if you go by 70-30%, then the south will just become a superpower within a very short period of time, because they have a lot of money at their disposal. And it wouldn't be fair on many other states that rely on the resources from the south. So the same thing can be said for Zamfara, where they discovered gold recently, or Lagos, that generates a lot of income. So it's a tricky one, and that one I'm not sure I'm qualified to even answer that, because on the ground it's very complex. There are different states that have different dynamics, and other states need more money, other states don't have as much. Because if you have a state that is extremely poor, you are going to create a situation whereby you breed people like Boko Haram and all that kind of stuff. So it's also in the interest of the states that have more to make sure that those states are doing well, because we are part of a nation. Like every nation, you try to make sure everywhere is doing well.
And here's another issue with that, is that if you make, there's certain nations that there's certain states within the nation that are already have high poverty. And so now if you move resources to other parts, and those parts develop ahead of those other states, there's nothing that stops somebody from one of the now poorer states that have just become even poorer from mass migrating into that other state that they perceive as doing better than their states. It's almost like how Lagos has a magnet effect, to the point where most people in Lagos aren't indigents of the state, but because of the economic prosperity that's occurring in Lagos, you find every ethnic group in Lagos, and thousands of people are moving to Lagos every single day, to the point where Lagos has spilled over into, was it Ogun State now? Lagos, a nation, essentially is spilling into 2 states, past the mainland and past Lekki. So how would that, and you said that's a tough issue, and yeah, of course it is, because that's another level to look at it, is that you might create a situation where you have this gross internal migration from poorer states to richer states.
Yeah. Can I ask one question? Regarding the regionalization of the presidency, how it is rotating. Now that it's coming, to the southeast and maybe south, is it not? Don't you think it's a good time for the Igbos to really be, a little bit calm, just in case they elect Kano and Nnamdi Kano as president of Nigeria, or somebody from the Igbo tribe as
or
the
Ebube
president?
Okoli. Why not Ebube Okoli? No, but the thing is, we that's zoning is another issue that's like restructuring, because some have alleged, like for example, Yahya Bello of Kogi State, he's alleged that he's going to be the next president of Nigeria and that there's no zoning in APC. It's not in the Constitution, and that's a gentleman agreement between PDP. So for example, certain factions of APC are saying that they're going to keep power in the north. Certain factions in APC are saying it should come to the south. Certain parts of APC are saying not only should it come to the south, it should come to the southeast. Now, certain people are saying, well, it should be an Igbo president. And certain people are saying Igbos are not just limited to southeast, but some Igbos are also in the south, and so they should be considered for the presidency as well, even though they're technically not in the region that should, according to that formula, get the presidency. So that already is a cluster that needs to be unwound. So that's another issue. And the first issue is some are alleging that zoning is dead and it died with Goodluck Jonathan, because if you remember, Yaradua was from the Northwest. Goodluck Jonathan was from the Niger Delta, or what they call the South. And so when Yaradua was finally announced to be dead, Goodluck Jonathan, of course, he struggled because they were saying that he should resign and have a northerner, or he should take a northerner as a vice president and then essentially resign so that the North can finish out their portion, because according to zoning, that's what needed to be done. And we see that that's not what happened. So some have even alleged that zoning is dead because Goodluck Jonathan broke it. Some allege that zoning is still on because the whole point of the presidency, the current presidency, was to restore zoning. So with zoning, there's so many camps there that we're not going to know until we see it.
Let me tell you what it is there. Nigeria, they like to bamboozle people with facts, and that's not facts, actually, non-facts. The truth is, there was a gentlemanly agreement, whether it was written in constitution or not. It's the way it has happened till now. And if that is broken, then there will be serious consequences, because I've even had the governor of Borno from the north say that the south should be the southeast or south should be the next president of Nigeria. So the way they call it, they just say the south, and they refer to the west, the way they zone these things. So if you look at the maneuvering that is happening recently, that Ayade from the PDP moved to APC party, right? Yeah. They moved from he's from Calabar, which is south. He's moved from APC, this is PDP to APC. So you can see that they are looking for somebody to rally around. They're not. It's looking for somebody. They know the Northerner is not going to be president again, not this time. So it's going to come from the south. So they are looking for a popular person from the south that they're going to rally around. And I suspect what is happening now is that the Northerners are looking for every way to avoid electing a direct Igbo man. Maybe somebody from the south, but not an Igbo man. That is what I think is happening.
That could be true as well. That could be true as well. These political calculations, they get crazier by the day. There was a time people were talking about Governor Umahi. There was a time when people were talking about Wike, but Wike, of course, would be under PDP. So there's even talk of potentially bringing back Goodluck Jonathan to finish off his term. And essentially after he's done, power goes back to the north. So there's a lot of political calculations going on. But before we even get to the 2023 election on ground, we have 2 years before we even get there. And we have a lot of serious issues that we need to address, because already there are murmuring saying that until things get right, there's not going to be any, the election is going to be boycotted. And whenever
that is the one that disturbs me. That's the one that disturbs me most. They are trying, and I fear that what is happening now, one of the few chances that an Igbo man might become president of Nigeria, they are creating instability to destabilize it. And some people have even said some things on the floor of the Congress of Nigeria that I feel, if a military official is listening to this, that's the kind of stuff that causes, God forbid, a military coup. They shouldn't be there.
Do you foresee a military coup happening within the next 3 to 5 years, or before?
It has to be before the election. If it comes after the election, then the president will be in. I think whoever is elected the next president is going to be extremely popular. I believe so, and people are going
Hopefully so.
to, yes.
Hopefully so, because people are really. It would have to be somebody that people could really rally around. That's the only way it would work.
That is the point, isn't it? Because by the time they elect you, you are probably going to be very popular. And one, it doesn't take a lot to be more popular than Buhari, does it? So as you can see, all you have to say is, fellow Nigerians, I will talk to you every day. You'll be more popular than Buhari. So you see what I mean? It means the next president is going to be extremely popular. And that's why I think after the president is elected, I don't think there's going to be a coup. But if things get out of control, and this is why I tell my people in the East, watch out. Because when there's a coup, it's not going to be an Igbo man. No. It's not going to be an Igbo man. It's an Hausa man that doesn't listen to anybody. That just shoots first before you ask question later. We are all going to lose out for it.
Hey, Ebube, how do you feel about he ran for VP, Igbo man. Is it Peter Obi? Is that his name? Yeah.
Well, he was a good administrator. Of course, he governed my state. He did well in regards to the educational system. He did well with the capital. He really set up the capital, really transformed into the city that it's growing into now. Some people didn't like his governing style. Some people said he was too rigid. But no Nigerian politician is going to have 100% approval rating from 100% of the people, just based on the fact that governors are loved and hated. So he was pretty solid. He was a solid administrator. If he was president, some of the good traits that he had at the state level, hopefully he would be able to translate those over. But then the real question is this: if people are complaining about the system and they're saying under the current system, regardless of who you put there, the rot is still in the wood, so the wood needs to be replaced before you repaint it. That's the real issue. People are saying that the system isn't conducive because even if you're good and you have good intentions, the system is going to frustrate those good intentions to ensure that the entrenched interests supersede any perceived good that could come out of having a good administrator. So that's another issue. People are saying that if you take within the Nigerian current political system, that when you take good people and put them in the Nigerian system, they're either ineffective or they eventually become like the same people that we always complain about having. So that's another issue that needs to be addressed in and of itself.
Can I ask you one last question before I leave?
Sure.
So, you see, what you just said just now is about politicians, being silly and all the rest of it. We know what we think about our politicians here in the UK and the ones in America, how hopeless people think they are. But what I think, if I look at Nigeria now, I feel like the problem of Nigeria is not that bad if we just get our act together. Right now, the reason why many diaspora is not returning back to Nigeria is because of the insecurity. I have a family member building a house in Ghana because of insecurity in Nigeria. We have a lot of expats overseas that are not coming. We have a lot of investment that could come in and fix a lot of things that are not coming in. What if we decide now, okay, we recruit those young men? By proportion of Algeria, we should have almost 2 million standing, and this is so just secure our borders, secure all these Boko Haram, wash them out of the north. If necessary, even wash them out of the Sahel if you need to. With that kind of numbers, you can.
What do you think the holdup is for defeating Boko Haram insurgency? Because there was reports that they were technically defeated.
Believe me, I am sitting here and I'm confused. I don't know what is happening. Believe me, there's a lot of work we need to do. And you are a very, very capable guy. Look under the hood because something is seriously wrong. Because I'm looking at this thing on paper. I said, we can handle this easily. Why are we not doing it? It's so simple. If you take the right number of men, you match 100,000 men into Borno, you wash Boko Haram out of that place, match another 100,000. There was a guy on TV last week. I was watching it, and they were talking about people that were kidnapped on the road. And these young men started protesting. All these area boys, they were protesting. They said they took the soldiers to where the people were kidnapped. The people that kidnapped the people, they showed them the bush that they went into. The soldiers went there and they were standing there. The young men told them, "Give us your guns. Let's go and get these guys." The young men in Nigeria that are not doing anything are looking for something to do. This I saw with my own eyes on the news. I said, Why are they not being recruited into the military? You don't need so much sophisticated weapon. Just give them an AK-47 and a bike. They are going to do what Boko Haram does. That's what they all use. If you have 1 million of them, let's see who is going to win that fight. You are going to secure the country, and people are going to start returning into the country. Do you think that kind of plan has any chance of working?
That actually makes a lot of perfect sense. Right now, it just doesn't. Well, here's the issue. And this is what I truly believe. I believe that the money meant for the military is being misappropriated, because if there's a budget, and unfortunately with the mentality, if someone has the mentality that I want to go ahead and embezzle as much money as I can, one of the biggest things that cuts into your ability to embezzle money is salary. So now it's the mind state of the person and the people in charge. If they're thinking, you know what, if I hire this many more people and I start paying out this much more per month, how much is left for me at the end of the day? And I truly believe that that mentality is what's harming us, because you read stories about people misappropriating billions of dollars meant for weapons at the height of the insurgency.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what the Nigerian government could do? Because now they can take money out of people's account. If you tell Nigerians to pay for their own security, they will pay. If you tell them pay 1,000 naira every month to get the military to do the job of securing the country, they will pay. If you say 2,000 naira, they will pay. Nobody wants to be kidnapped. Yesterday, I was watching on TV how the parents were welcoming their children. You need to see the way they were jubilating to see their children that were returned back.
After they paid 180 million naira ransom.
How much to people that are going to go and kidnap more people? If you can put that money in and take that money from our account and use to maintain your military, people will be grateful. Your borders, people will have peace of mind. So, thank you for having me. Thank you.
No problem. Always a pleasure, man. Always a good pleasure.
All right, we'll take 2 more callers. Is that cool, Ebube?
Why not? Let's do it.
All right, come on. All right, Confidence, go ahead. Confidence.
Peace, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Peace, what's up?
What's going on? How's everything?
All right, I'm glad to hear you guys talking about this. Everything's going all right on my side, but it's an interesting topic. But my question was, if we're restructuring based on kingdoms, because the Igbo kingdoms have internal issues, the Yoruba kingdoms have internal issues. Who do you think would be like the initial people to start this whole federal restructuring? Like, I know I talked to my family about it. Some people are interested, like some chiefs,
Let me make some brief corrections really quickly. It wouldn't be restructuring by kingdom. I personally don't think it would occur to that level. When we discuss restructuring, we're essentially saying, and this is just the definition of restructuring, for every nation, there's a governing document. In this particular instance, it's a constitution. The constitution sets up the structure of the nation. So once the nation's structure is set up, there's 2 levels. There's political setup and there's economic setup. And anytime you change that document, you change the rules and you create a new system, politically and or economically, and or either or economically or politically. So now within that governing document, some are saying that that document needs to be changed and a new structure created. Those people are people who are in favor of restructuring. Some are saying, no, that's not the problem at all, because we have a culture of corruption. So if we just come up with a new system and we keep the same people, or people who are similar to the people that we have now, it doesn't matter the system that we're operating under, because it's the same at the end of the day. If you put rotten fruit in a new bag and then you change the bag, you didn't change the fact that the fruit is rotten. So you still have the same problems regardless of if it's a designer bag or if it's not. So now, when we talk about restructuring, that's more so what we're talking about is the political and the economic restructuring. Now, in regards to the political and economic restructuring, if that was indeed to take place, it would probably it would be organic. It would be either the government listening and saying, okay, this is what we need to do based on the will of the people. Now, typically the people express their will in various ways. So that would be something that we just have to observe. Hopefully it would be peaceful. A peaceful process. Of course, that's not always guaranteed, but that is the hope, because Nigeria, for example, is a large nation and it's very it's centered to West Africa's stability economically and otherwise. So, of course, peace is always the option to hope for. So now, are you in favor of political or economic restructuring or both, and why? Or are you not in favor of restructuring at all?
Like my background is I'm part of the whole Marcus Garvey League, where he said he wanted a Negro empire. He wanted all countries to unite, not just Nigeria. Basically, he wanted like a super state where Black people would be united in administering it. And our setup is that we go community to community, setting up like little government town unions. And I thought it was compatible with Southeast Nigeria. I don't know if it's only a Enugu state, but we have like had some restructuring in Enugu where the town unions with the chiefs and the communities, they're the fourth tier of government. So we do have like some contacts there that are interested in the whole Marcus Garvey vision. But I don't know with the whole, I don't think it's really possible to restructure Nigeria without involving other countries, just because if you look at the borders, the culture.
Why do you say that?
And the origin. Well, I mean, the origin of Nigeria, even one of the original names was, the Niger Sudan, the Hausa Empire. It was a structure to be basically like a remote control for Muslims and British people. Getting the politicians to overlook that fact and create like some sort of merged religion, political state. I think they tried everything. I don't think they know what to do. And I don't think if they would have restructured and bring peace, I think they would have done it already. I think Garveyism is the only solution. You got to incorporate the whole continent,
Essentially, Africa needs to be one country, correct?
Yeah, and the Black people need to come together and protect their interests as an Arab League. And if you know, the Arab League is influencing a lot in Nigeria. Especially, we got a cultural minister that says Arabic is a unifying force of the world, and we got to learn Arabic language, and that's our culture minister right now. But that's just my vision or my view. I don't know if I don't really tackle political restructuring because I don't think it's possible. But maybe I'm ignorant, but not just my view on things.
Much appreciated.
Hey, Confidence, appreciate you coming on, brother.
All right, one love. Peace.
No problem. We'll take this last caller. Village Trader, you got to turn off the playback.
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
Thanks for having me.
It's an echo on your end.
Oh, how about now?
Testing. That's better.
Sounds
Go
good.
ahead.
Yeah, it's better now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little bit better. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that is okay. Can you hear me now?
That's a little bit better.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to address the question Ebube was been raising earlier, and about if we were to restructure Nigeria, what would be the best approach to it? And first of all, when one of the callers earlier talked about that if, for instance, if the South's demands for more of their resources back from oil, that other states that are already dependent on those resources will really be impacted. That there are two questions that come from that. The first question is the current resources they derive from the oil. What are they doing with it? So, and the second question is, the question is, oil in Nigeria has created a lazy, like a dependency culture. Most states are not viable not because they don't have anything necessarily. They have resources, but the dependency oil has created in Nigeria to the point where we go to Abuja every month to collect allocations, made them ignore what they have in their states. Let me give an instance. I'm from Ogun State, right? Ijebu has probably the second or third largest deposit of bitumen in the world, behind Canada, that is untapped in the world.
Nigeria should have the best roads.
Yeah, so if you're looking, that should not even be a problem. And in regards to devolution of powers, let's say we even keep the current status quo. The current structure itself stifles growth. So let me give an instance. Do you remember when we used to have a NEPA before it was privatized?
PHCN.
So yeah, so we went to ABK local government in Abeokuta, right? The South local government in Abeokuta, right? So we were doing some research. We're trying to set up some manufacturing back then. But they told us, listen, even if you guys create your own generating company, the federal government does not allow you to generate over 20 megawatts of electricity. If you do, you're going to be forced to supply it to add it to the national grid. That's the way it works. So even if you come with that idea, so we're like, okay, so how much will it take to power a local government? So based on our own study, if you exclude the manufacturing sector of the local government, right, the areas for manufacturing, and if you take that away, you can power a local government in Ogun State as of 10 years ago with $25 million. That is all you need to do. That is from using recycling and all this stuff. It's like $25 billion at the time. But
is that a recurring expenditure, or is that a one-time payment?
No, that would be the to build on that. Of course, you're gonna get monthly payments, and you're gonna get for other investments. But to set it up, and then you pay for it by the money you get from people paying, and but that is just excluding the manufacturing areas that you did that will not take from that power itself, but just from the people. But my biggest point is that the current structure does not allow for innovation. It assumes that everything has to go to Abuja first. So if you're gonna keep the current structure, and if you're gonna do some kind of tinkering, it has to be, in my own opinion, not so much focused on state rights, but on local government rights. I think we've lost that in the shuffle. People talk about state rights, but local government, in my opinion, is what is needed, because by having more powers to the local government, that kind of cares for the minority groups. Because you have to remember that in 1963 to 1966, when we had the regional government, the reason why Gowon was forced to create the state government was because of the complaints of the minority groups, that even within the regional government, they were being, they were not getting a fair deal.
That's not necessarily true.
Gowon
created the state structure. Gowon, essentially what had happened was this, is that prior to the decree that Yakubu Gowon made in the 60s, Nigeria had a regional system. Now, what happened with the regional system, there were some young officers from the South, led by a man from the Niger Delta, from current-day Delta State. And he essentially led Nigeria's first coup to rid Nigeria of what he perceived to be corruption. And he led some other fellow officers, and they essentially destroyed most of the government with the hopes of restoring it to something else. Now, in the process of destroying and forcefully restructuring the government, a man named Ogui Iransi stopped the coup, and so essentially took over the government from that point that had been essentially destroyed. So taking over the government, he didn't punish the coup plotters in the way that some elements within the country believed that they should have been punished. He didn't kill any of them. He let them all live. He was a very forgiving man. He didn't feel that their lives needed to be taken. He wanted to just end the bloodshed. Unfortunately, the ethnic groups that felt slighted by this took their frustration out on him instead and killed him very short into his stay. Now, Nigeria was still in regions after the death of Ogui Iransi. Now, what happened is that there were some agreements, and till this day, those agreements are still debated on both sides as to what was actually agreed to at the meeting at the conference in Ghana. But when Yakubu got back, the thing that we know for sure is that he abolished the regional system and created the original states with a strong federal government. And that's the same system that we have today. So we went from a handful of states to now 36 states. And we still have the same strong federal government. And some people are calling for even more states. So you have to understand that the current system that we have today was put in place by Yakubu Gowon, and to an extent, it's still active.
But yeah, I agree with you. But the question is, why do you think they're asking for more states? Because the minorities, even within those states, they feel slighted in some ways. So my reason for saying what I said earlier was because if you want to keep Nigeria the way it is, because we only have three options. You keep the country the way it is right now. You go back to 1963, like you said, or you separate the country, right? That would be the three options we have.
Well, the three options that I laid out were you can revert to something that has previously been seen in the past, or you can create something wholly new, or you can copy something like that's working out in the world, like what they have in the UK. So you can either copy from something that you've personally done as a nation, copy from what another nation has done, or come up with something wholly new. So those are the three ways to restructure, if restructuring is indeed what the people decide that they want. Outside of that, the only other option is to allow for the status quo to remain.
Which is not currently working at the time. So, but it speaks on the bigger issue of cultural differences as well. So our culture, beliefs, and values are different across, ethnic and regional lines. So that has to be put into consideration as well.
Definitely.
So whatever system of government,
every culture has to be given space to feel that they're able to thrive as a culture and as a people. Otherwise, that system isn't going to work, because you're going to create a system of oppressed and oppressive. And whenever you create such an unjust system, or non-just system, as I should say, you're going to create people who are going to naturally fight that system, because oppression is unnatural.
Right. So, but at the same time, it's also very unrealistic to expect people that have been dominating the sector of the government for years to really give up the power. So that's where the friction would come in. So if somebody has been dominating the current system for so long, you're not going to expect them to willingly, even though they know they're wrong, you're not going to willingly think that they're just going to let it go. So there has to be some kind of confrontation. So my own proposal has always been, eventually we all have to sit down and go towards a referendum or an actual sovereign national conference, not a national conference, a sovereign where it is binding. So there has to be, because they've been doing all this national conference for a while, that it's not been binding. You cannot sit down and expect the same House of Rep that is skewed by numbers and tribe to decide on those numbers. Of course, the Northerners are going to, so you have to sit down, have a talk about the kind of system you want based on the cultural differences, and decide, hey guys, do we want to stay together? And to be honest with you, I don't think that Nigeria can work, together. I don't think I think we've kind of lost the chance to do that. I think we're so knee deep in this.
What makes you say
that? Because of the current situation, the current predicament that we have. So
the point that there's no going back.
Yeah, because you remember in 1993, I'm Yoruba, right? So when it comes to religion, as a Yoruba man, culture truncates religion. I think people should be aware of that, because in Yoruba tribe, everybody has a Muslim cousin, a Christian brother. When I was growing up, we went to festivals, to Egungun festivals. And my grandparents, when they were doing their Muslim festival, we went there. And when my moms were doing the thing at the Catholic church, we all went there. That was the way we grew up. So we never saw, I don't care how much you think you're religious, when it comes to, at the end of the day, you were a Yoruba person first. So that kind of went over that. So, and you remember in 93 when MK ran, that was a Muslim ticket. into this Nigeria, into this Nigeria, that's never going to happen again. That is never going to happen. So we've lost that opportunity to mend those lines, unfortunately. Sorry. So in my opinion, the only two chances that I see happening would be some kind of regional restructuring, or we sit down and we mutually just part ways. But the current Nigeria itself, the way it is, I don't see it working anymore.
That's an interesting perspective.
I don't see it working anymore.
Do you have a specific question on restructuring, or you just want to make that statement, that analysis?
Okay. The only thing that I'm going to add for restructuring, because you asked about political or economic restructuring, is that Nigeria is so blessed. It's amazing what we have on the ground. It's when I was looking through it, I was stunned. Each local government, I think we have about 727 local government right now, or 723 local governments. Each local government has at least one or two natural resources that can actually, they can live off on if you look at it.
Or more.
Yeah. And most of these things are in the north. So I'm always amused when people say that the north is poor. No, they're not poor because they don't have anything.
They're just underutilized.
Right. So I'm like, guys, my friends from the north, from Kano, for instance, I'm like, guys, if you really structure, trust me, you actually be more. It's your own benefit more than us from the south. You actually gain more as northerners from restructuring than we do. But some of them don't understand when I say it. Like, I'm like, God, you have this amazing land mass.
Well, there's a lot of misunderstanding around the word restructuring. When people hear restructuring, they think 20. You can get 20 different people together, and you can give them a piece of paper, and you say, you know what, write down your definition of restructuring. That's why I was very explicit in giving my direct definition of restructuring in the beginning, so that everybody understood the playing field in which we were going to be discussing. But if you get 20 people together and they write down their answers, they're all going to write down something different. And so one of the major things is that we have to sensitize people to what is it to begin with and what it isn't, and where it starts and where it stops.
Okay, so let me wrap it up by asking you a question. Because the one of the reasons why I said I don't see it working was not necessarily political in nature, and was not necessarily cultural in nature. It was more religious. You know how we are with our religion, the current Nigerian being. So that would be because for instance now, the Yoruba Muslims now, for the first time in a long time, like I mentioned earlier, as a Yoruba person, that culture truncates with religion, right? But for the first time, is shifting. It's moving towards a more radicalized form of Islam. So that is my own word. No, like in terms of proposing Sharia laws in the Southwest, there's no way that would have happened 20 years ago. No way.
Do you think that proposal is going to go through? Because I've heard a lot of Yoruba Muslims say they don't see that actually happening. But do you personally see that as potentially happening?
I don't see that.
It's hard for you to see that actually taking root.
Everybody and Prince, it's not that it's going to happen. That is the problem. Is that seed that you're sowing that's the problem. You get what I'm saying? It's not like if you actually pass, but when you start sowing those seeds of division within the Yoruba tribe, that's never happened before. That is the issue. So when that discord of you're my Muslim cousin, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, what are you thinking? Are you really a Sharia guy or not? So that's never happened to us before. So it's that seed of discord that's been sown that I'm worried about.
Hopefully that's not the seed that's getting sown, but I definitely understand the worry.
Mm-hmm. Right. Billy Trader, anything else you'd like to share in closing? Then we're going to go ahead and close out.
Okay. Hopefully I'm here. I have businesses in Nigeria. I have family back there too. And I've told them, like the pastor told them 3 months ago, have a plan B, C, D, F, and G. Get your passport ready. If this shit goes down south, you better head to Benin Republic. Thank God we have cousins in the Benin Republic, our ancestral cousins, by the way. So at least you can understand what they're saying. But in this Nigeria that we are right now, if you live in that country, have a plan B. All right, have a good night, sir.
All right, brother. Appreciate you coming on. All right, Ebube, go ahead. Give your final word.
All right. Yeah, this was a great discussion. People were able to weigh in and air out some of the thoughts and analysis that they had that they felt they couldn't air out last time, or if they missed the live. So, very good discussion for everybody who contributed and called in. Thank you for your contribution. Very good analysis from everybody. I will say this: if you haven't been to Up Close and Center, make sure you go to Up Close and Center and subscribe. Check out some of the new documentaries that have been posted. Also, too, make sure you subscribe here and hit the like button. And as always, thank you for your time and your commitment to the continent.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Ebube, Brother Ebube, it's always a pleasure. Until next time, family, Dynasty Mirror Search for Huru. Peace.